Bad data, you can add an enrichment tool. Bad sequences, add an AI writer, add automation. We ended up with 10 tools that don't talk to each other, a CRM nobody trusts, and a RevOps person who's essentially a full-time plumber. My guest today thinks we have been solving the wrong problem. GTM is no longer a tooling problem, it's more of an infrastructure problem. That distinction actually changes everything about how we build.
Product usage, but I also get something from her LinkedIn. I also realized that I've had email conversations with her 6 months ago and so on. All of this needs to come together. When you fail to bring them together sufficiently, then you have subpar experiences.
Cargo, replacing the SDR. Sure, I might get cancelled for that, but I just want to understand, is it solving all the problems of SDRs? Context matters the most in 2026.
You move from sort of an operator executor role to an architect role. It's like flying a plane with a cockpit versus not.
Hello and welcome back to One GTM Labs podcast. Today's episode is one I've been waiting to do for a while because it gets at something I think a lot of GTM teams are feeling but haven't quite named yet. We have spent years talking about GTM as a tooling problem. Bad data, you can add an enrichment tool. Bad sequences, add an AI writer. Slow routing, add automation. And somewhere along the way, we ended up with 10 tools that don't talk to each other, a CRM nobody trusts, and a RevOps person who's essentially a full-time plumber. My guest today thinks we have been solving the wrong problem. Tariq is the commander-in-chief at Cargo, where he's been building out their GTM motion and driving what he calls the GTM engineering movement. His argument is that GTM is no longer a tooling problem, it's more of an infrastructure problem. And that distinction actually changes everything about how we build. And we are going to get into what that means. Tariq will be talking about a lot of workflows, a lot of things that go behind to make some GTM infrastructure work for all the teams and what insights we can take from. So Tariq, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure, Shruti, nice to be here. Thank you for the introduction.
Absolutely. And I would love to know exactly what a commander-in-chief role is responsible for. So over to you, Tariq. Please explain us what you do at Cargo and how, what are the things that you're building right now?
Sure. I mean, my title is a bit nonsense. We were 3 people in a dev shack in San Francisco when this all started 3 years ago. And I had to pick it up. So I just came up with this and it's somehow stuck. And I don't have the need to come up with a more serious one yet.
I actually love that. That's why I wanted you to talk a bit about that.
Yeah. I hope it catches on one day, but I don't think it will.
Right.
Yeah, happy to be here. Where shall we start?
Absolutely. So I just wanted to get started on the problem, what is actually broken. So I want to make sure we all are looking at GTM problems with the same perspective, with the same things. So when you say GTM infrastructure is the problem, is infrastructure problem and not a tooling problem, what do you mean? And what does the broken version look like in practice for a team that thinks they are fine?
Sure. I mean, if we take a step back, go-to-market is what getting your product into the hands of people who should know about it and should pay for it. With the passage of time, doing this has become very technical. There's lots of data that's spread around. There's lots of tools that interact with that data, move it around. And then finally, there's people and agents that engage with your final customer or prospect in order to do something with that data. It's still a very nascent field, right? So the sophistication has really come in the last few years. 10, 15 years ago, having a simple sort of outbox setup with a simple lead list was sufficient to do GTM well. As more people get into doing this at scale, it becomes harder and harder, right? And so to continue to do well in this market, you have to keep innovating. And from there, we come to the concept of what we call GTM engineering, etc. And really, if you break it down, how I see it is to do GTM well, you have to do 2 things well. One is experimentation, and secondly is scaling experimentation for when it works, right? And that's where the dichotomy comes in. Most of the market, we feel, is biased towards thinking in terms of experimentation because that's been that's historically been what most people have been concerned with. But more and more, you find that because most people can experiment now given the tools that are available, where you really see differential in people performing in GTM is the next step, which is scaling the experiments. And scaling requires infrastructure. So that's how we came up with the definition of infrastructure. And it's really two things. Number one, infrastructure is your context. So it's all of the intelligence spread across your stack,
Yeah.
right? Which defines what to do, when to do, what to say, etc., etc. And the other bit is how to do it, right? So, okay, you have the right message crafted by the right tool or person for 100,000 people. How do you get to those people? How do you know who they are? How do you get to their right emails? How do you follow up once they do get back to you, etc.?
Yeah.
And those resemble very similarly engineering problems. So building context with data that's spread across multiple tables that is formatted differently. There's often not contiguous, so it has different data has different definitions in every system over time, and it's in different formats.
Yeah.
And so getting all that data together into one layer, both your tables and your semantic data, is quite a challenge. So that's data engineering, and then running systems, so workflows and syncs and moving stuff around, handling agents, handling errors, and so on and so forth. That's a DevOps problem. And GTM people have both those problems.
Yeah.
What we don't have, or what we didn't have until recently, is a good infrastructure system to manage this, right? We have point solutions. So we have good orchestration tools. Everyone knows about Clay. We know about N10. We have some database solutions, etc. We don't have a good sort of systemic solution, and that's where we come in to the market.
Absolutely. I love how you have explained it. It's more of a how you are orchestrating all that data and then making sense out of it, right? So I want to push a little bit on this because the obvious response from a lot of people that going to be is we already have tools like Clay, we already have HubSpot, we already have all these CRMs, we have Apollo, right? Don't want to name call anyone. I'm just giving an example. Like we are not a small team, we have data. But then why isn't that enough? What's fundamentally missing from the stack that exists today? Because you mentioned about orchestrating, you mentioned about the infrastructure, but then even after having so many things, what's still missing?
Yeah, I think we have quite a large choice in point solutions. So I think Clay is a great sort of experimental tool because it's built like a sheet so anyone can use it. You can get some data into it and you can do enrichment, right? And that's great. So it's a great enrichment tool. Apollo is a pure enrichment list building, lead finding tool. And the CRM is one of the databases where you can store context.
Yeah.
But on their own, they are not sufficient. And even stitched together, we find that they are still not sufficient to do the job as well as they could. And this is really the problem. So it's what I call often in isolation, you have these pieces that look really nice and do the job that they're supposed to do. But when you put them together, it becomes like a Jenga problem, right?
Exactly.
Every piece is dependent on every other piece. But GTM is a moving landscape,
Right.
and it's built on intelligence that moves all the time. One, you're not capturing all of that intelligence with these point solutions, and then changing every block risks everything falling apart, and that becomes a big team talent human problem to solve then and manage. And so that's why these tools are not enough. For instance, yes, you can bring sheets into Clay and get tables out, but you have context that's real time accumulating in different scenarios. So, for example, you have your product data, which interacts with your CRM data, which probably interacts with where you're storing your TAM because your TAM is also evolving over time. Right?
Right. Yeah.
And all of this is creating signals that need to come into one layer so you can prioritize them, combine them. So I get a signal about Shruti's usage from product usage, but I also get something from her LinkedIn. I also realize that I've had email conversations with her 6 months ago and so on. All of this needs to come together
Exactly.
in front of either the sales rep or the agent so they can properly do the job to build a relationship with Shruti.
Right.
When you fail to bring them together sufficiently, then you have subpar experiences. The end result is clear. People will buy or not buy a product given the relationship that's been built with them, either way. But it's really that stitching together that makes the difference.
Yeah, I completely agree with that because we have all the signals around us, but hardly, not many people are actually orchestrating it, bringing all of it together, and then making sense out of it. So, just my next question is towards cargo. You have mentioned it explicitly that you describe it as a unified context layer and a unified logic layer with two interfaces. One is UI for operators and an API for engineers and agents. So, what does that actually mean in plain English? If you were to explain it to me, I'm a head of product marketing. How would you go about and tell me what cargo exactly does?
Yeah. So there's two questions in there.
Yeah.
What cargo is fundamentally and how can you use it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
what it is, firstly, is, as you said, it's a data layer. So data slash context layer that meets a logic slash orchestration layer, right? And so a lot of people say, to vernacularize it, they say it's Clay plus N plus Superbase. Superbase being the data layer, Clay being sort of the enrichment API layer, and N10 being the logical agentic layer, right? So if you
Yeah.
plug all those together, you get something that resembles cargo. I mean, really, we're in the market of sophistication, and
Hmm.
anyone who's moving from sort of ad hoc stuff to more systemic thinking will eventually think about cargo as the go-to solution for building that. Then,
Right.
in terms of how to use it, you have two options. So traditionally, everyone has been using for building. And so we are a graphical workflow builder, a bit like N10, where you have nodes and nodes talk to each other, and you have a tabular view of the runs that you've made, so
Hmm.
you can track what has failed, what has not failed, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
And now, because people have moved to Cloud Code, so the terminal to write the same workflows and run them and inspect them, we also now have a terminal layer. So Cargo
Okay.
is an NPM package you can install directly into Cloud Code. So you can tell your agent what you want to
Hmm.
build or to run, and the agent goes into the into the API layer, does it, and gets you the result that you need. So that's really where we stand.
Got it. Can you explain a bit about some of the workflows that are actually super helpful? Maybe we can start with SDRs, how they can actually build some automation, some, for example, in Slack. Can you explain a bit of the real scenarios or workflows that you might have used and are super helpful for people who are actually listening to this podcast?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Slack is a good example to start with. We just delivered something with your team, so with one GTM lab,
Yeah.
to one of the cybersecurity companies, where essentially, if you model what the perfect AE looks like out there, right? They have a certain set of rituals which require a lot of rigor. So you do some research, you pull up some signals, you craft some good messaging, you send that out, you manage your replies, and lack of replies, etc. And that if you do all those well, then you end up with a good week and you end up hitting your quotas. In practice, there's a lot of variance in how well people follow these rituals because there's humans who have to do them. And so what we did for the AE team was to set up a Slack digest every Monday. So the A's log in on Monday morning, and they have a Slack digest, number one, with top 5 companies in the book of business who are, number one, the best fit, and number two, the most ready to be engaged this week by their A's. And then for each of these companies, we have a little object of signals that they have emitted. So that makes the conversation relevant for them. And then also their top 5 contacts. So who are the most relevant people at those companies today to talk to? And again, that's built on signals, which could be that they've moved to a new position, or they've said something on social media that makes
Right.
them a good fit, etc. And so you have companies and people and what to say to those companies and people in that digest. So that's a Slack message that an AE receives. And now you've taken out 10 hours of work that they were to do
Mm,
otherwise, and they can go straight to building those relationships. And I think
okay.
that's a great use case. And what's unique about Cargo is, because the agentic layer sits within that Slack channel, the AEs can then have a back and forth with the agent. So let's say we've given the digest, but then the AEs can call up the agent again and say, okay, I need clarification on this. Okay, we're maybe missing a contact in this company. Maybe let's not talk to Shruti, but let's talk to Sachin in this company, etc., etc. And the agent can do that real time.
Right. Got it. So, just to follow up on that, what kind of signals are you able to map through it? And just to avoid a lot of noise, what is actually working in those scenarios?
Yeah, actually, signals wise, we're quite unopinionated. So, with a couple of exceptions, we don't
Hmm.
offer native signals in Cargo, right?
Okay.
I know that some other platforms do. Yet, almost everyone uses signals in Cargo, and that's simply because they bring their own cocktail of signals that work best in their scenario in the industry to Cargo. Because it's
Right.
an orchestration layer, you can connect to anything out there which has an API or a webhook capability.
Hmm.
And so everyone brings their own cocktail. In cyber, for example, I give you one GTM's example. I mean, the signals that work really well are either regulatory signals. So if a company has certain, certification, if they're compliant with certain laws, or hirings, so people in
Hmm.
new positions or job posts, etc. And then
Okay.
technographics, right?
Great.
So if someone is using a specific set of security tools, then they may or may not be a good ICP for your clients. And so you have the full liberty to use any of the tools that will provide you these signals. So some of those tools, for example, the one GTM lab uses for technographics, are present in Cargo today. and they're using those natively, right? So that's a native
Right.
integration. Some of them are available with credits, some of them with their own API key, or either way. Some of them are not native integrations. And so then you set up custom HTTP calls or webhook calls so that you can get those into cargo, into the context layer, and then use them in your logic layer later. And it works. It
Interesting.
works better
Yeah.
than having vanilla signals packaged by the provider, because this is
Right.
customized to each of everyone's sort of secret recipe, right? And even within the same industry, companies have their own recipe which works better than someone else. And in cargo, you can translate that into something that works programmatically without too much oversight.
Interesting. That's very helpful. We'll actually be putting all those workflows that we really talked about here so that everybody is looking at them and they can understand how cargo is actually fitting into the picture and easily helping SCRs, for example, in this scenario. And they have helped us at One GTM Lab fixing all of these things for our clients. So we have really had a great time working with them. And these things have been, like, without a doubt, the most helpful one for us. So moving on to one more question around this. Can you talk a little bit about the golden record versus what you would see in a CRM that hasn't gone through cargo, and what's actually different? And does it really matter?
Right. I have to say that a year ago, we did something called the CRM Hygiene series. So you can find it on YouTube. It's a set of tutorials built by GTM operators.
I'll add that link.
Yes,
Yeah.
where you have different scenarios for how to keep your CRM hygienic and dependable, right? So
Yeah.
that can be deduplication or the right associations between contacts and companies and normalization of titles and websites and whatever. And I thought that was just a vanilla exercise I was doing to, as an education piece, but in fact, it's one of our more popular content resources out there. And then when we launched the partnership channel 3 months ago, that CRM hygiene piece is now proving to be a very popular choice for agencies to begin with as well. And I think that's partly symptomatic of the kind of GTM people have been doing, where, people
Interesting.
do a lot of ad hoc stuff and there's a mess and a team has to interact with that CRM mess every day. And, it creates friction in the organization. And then you leave money on the table because you're not as efficient, or just people don't align in the right direction.
Right.
And so what is the golden record is, you have two kinds of CRMs. So let's say a raw CRM, which is very unhygienic, or something much more organized, right? And we believe that cargo is one of the better tools situated to get from, A to B.
Right.
And a raw CRM is, the symptoms, everyone knows about them, right? The same contact can be duplicated 3 times. Maybe they belong to 2 different companies. Maybe they have outdated job titles, companies with no employees or no employee counts. There's properties that are not filled. And so you're making it very hard for your sales team to organize and work with the CRM that's there. And so that doesn't look like, those don't look like golden records. So if you get a dependable CRM which has data hygiene and it has methods of staying hygienic, right? So that's programmatic workflows that run in cargo, then you have something that's dependable. Add on top 2 things. Number one, context. So you shouldn't put all of your context into your CRM. That's not what it's for. But you should synthesize that context. So that can be account research or snippets or conversation history, etc., in the right fields in your CRM. So you give more intelligence to your reps and not just tables that, organize data for them. And the second thing that you should give them is sort of control to trigger things directly from the CRM where they already are. And again, this is something we did sort of experimentally last year, where we built CRM buttons. So from, let's say, your Salesforce, you can push a button on a company record and then it will trigger cargo, and cargo will put contacts for those companies. And those simple interventions then really do change the lives of people in the sales team. And so that's what we call a golden CRM. A golden CRM is dependable, it has the right context, and it gives enough power to reps where they are to do the job well. And I mean, unfortunately, most CRMs don't resemble this, and the CRM industry has not done very well to give reps the interface that they should have in 2026. But we're part of the ecosystem of solutions who's trying to improve that experience so that people can just do more with what they have in their teams.
Right. So after you've spoken a lot about how the CRM problem is also getting solved, I think I have worked as a product marketer and I know for a fact that SDRs and CRMs don't go along that much. There's a very huge disconnect. There's a huge disconnect in that. So just wanted to have this question directly. Is cargo replacing the SDR? I'm sure I might get cancelled for that, but I just want to understand, like, is it solving all the problems of SDRs, or how is it working right now? Is it gonna really replace SDRs, or is it just gonna empower them, help them get their work done faster with more context and more visibility across all the workflows that they're working?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, there's two beneficiaries of what we do. One is the sort of SDR, AE, sales rep kind of persona, and the other
Yeah.
persona is the builder operator type. So someone like you, or a RevOps person, or marketing ops person, and so on. So for the SDR, what we're really changing is we're making people more powerful where they are, right? And so people have different definitions of what the end state looks like. Maybe for some, it's an end state where there are no SDRs and it's only agents doing work. Fine, right? We don't have an opinion on that. Similarly, there's enough teams out there that say, look, our sales reps spend too much time fighting admin and tools and not enough building relationships. So
Yeah.
what can we do upstream to make sure that they're most empowered with the right intelligence, the right reminders, and the right context to build relationships better, right? So in an ideal world, we're making the AE or the SDR, etc., more empowered to do their job. Realistically, we're also in the phase where the economy is fundamentally shifting. The way we do work is
Absolutely.
fundamentally shifting, right? And so there will be reorganization in the way sales teams are structured, and or maybe
Yeah.
even the persona that's found in these sales teams. And I think either way, we're going to be relevant in enabling that shift with the
Hmm.
infrastructure that we have. And then that brings me to the next persona. So people like yourself or RevOps and marketing ops. First of all, I think it's a great win for GTM teams that finally we have context layers that everyone can rely on, right? We were talking about the
Exactly.
golden CRM. Biggest problems with CRM is everyone reads it differently, right?
Yeah.
So lead means something else to marketing, but it means something else to sales, right? Metrics means some different things to different teams. And so no one can
Hmm.
align. And so there's one GTM team that's fighting three different wars because they just can't agree on which one to fight. And that's
Right.
changed now because the context layer is further upstream, right? So no one particular team owns the context layer. In fact, everyone owns the context layer, whether
Yeah.
that's in your data warehouse or maybe it's at your GitHub repo or a collection of two. Either way, that's team agnostic. And the second thing that's different is now you have a lot more power to build more efficiently, right? Build more robust systems because your tools are better and you have agents helping you do that, right? And secondly, you have a lot more power to observe what you have built and then report back the advantages of what you're providing to the sales team. And
Right.
so you
Yeah.
move from sort of an operator executor role to an architect role, which is, we'll all agree it's more interesting. And also it means that personas like yourself can, more easily be involved in strategic discussions and leadership discussions because then you own the context layer, you own the logic layer. You're best placed to tell your leadership, hey, should we realign which persona we're targeting? Is there something broken in the way we do things today, etc.? You can answer those questions with the context that you have. So that
Hmm.
clearly opens up room for having more leadership roles that are coming from these origins. So that's really,
Absolutely.
why we exist. We are operators like yourself, and we have a view on where the world is going, and we're trying to make that accelerate.
Absolutely. I think from before 2020, there are a lot of conversations around how all teams are not talking the same language. They speak very differently. They are not aligned and all of it. So I'm so glad to actually talk to you about these things because context matters the most in 2026 and beyond. I think because we are using AI at a speed where if we don't have context, it's just gonna hallucinate or it's just gonna not work with what your ultimate goals are, and it's just gonna repeat the same theory, right? All teams are not talking together. They have different KPIs, but ultimately the KPI should be the same, and the language and the narrative of what you're actually selling should be the same. So I'm really glad that we are having this conversation today because that is what will build all of us together in a space where we can talk in sync. We are aligned. And that's the biggest challenge that all of the teams face, especially GTM, product marketing, marketing ops, and everybody, right? So I'm really glad that we had this conversation. And you mentioned that Cargo exposes an API that AI agents can call into. So that's the part that I'm really interested and just want to get the best out of it from you. So what's actually happening today? Like, can you give me an example of how agents are calling Cargo and what it gets back? Do you have any customer stories that you can share and explain what agentic in Cargo looks like today?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's less of an innovation and it's more just a change in the way people access the product, right? So
Yeah.
in the last few months, there's been a big hype about using Cloud Code. and for good reasons, right?
Yeah.
So instead of using UIs in simple tools, you can go into your terminal, which has all your context. You can give what you need as a natural language prompt, and the
Mhm.
agent goes and builds what you need and gets you back the result, right? So if you take a simple example, I tell my agent I need 100 people working in RevOps in India, let's say, and I want this and this column as information next to them, right? So the agent can go and use whatever resources it has at its
Mhm.
disposal or all your context to come back, give you that list with the right columns. You have the CSV, you download it, or you send those to a campaign or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
That's fine. And that's what Cloud Code is for. Once you start doing enough of that and at a higher volume, then you start running into what I was telling you about before, infrastructure problems. So data engineering problems or DevOps
Yeah.
problems, right? Just because, Cloud will only render so many agents to do, so much work at a given time. And Cloud will not always deal with bumps in the road. So it can be failures or retries or rate limits or batch limits, whatever. And then secondly, it's very hard for you to reproduce in the same exact way what Claude has done before to something else. So we
Mm.
always hear amongst our clients now that because when you're just shipping basic stuff on Claude, it's very hard to hand it over to your team or even to your client because it's very hard to know what happened in the black box and to repeat that reliably. And so really what we've done is because now Cargo is a downloadable NPM package inside your terminal, so we're exposing the internal API to Claude, right? And then what Claude does is it understands the problem, and instead of trying to do everything itself, it can choose to then build something permanent, so that, what we call a primitive inside Cargo to
Okay.
do the job. So that can be a data model, that can be a workflow, an agent, etc. Right? Load that task to whatever primitive has been built. And once the task is completed, get that back to the user or wherever it needs to go, right? And the advantage then is number one, you're leveraging our infrastructure. So if there's API calls to be made, if there are tools to be accessed, for example, if LinkedIn has to be accessed, Claude doesn't have a way to do it, but you can do it through Cargo. And when there's bumps in the road, Cargo is built to deal with those bumps, right? And so Claude manages that better and you have a better handle of what's going on. And then once everything is done, you have a clear log of what actions took place, what runs took place, what problems
Correct.
happened, how much did it cost, and so on and so forth. And so that's
Interesting.
what we call infrastructure is it's like flying a plane with a cockpit versus not. And this, you really realize once you start doing things at scale and sophistication.
Yeah, I love that. Big. I just want to come to a question where a lot of people who are listening right now to this podcast will be early stage, right? They are at a stage or a phase where they would want to understand. They might not have a huge team. They might not have people supporting, the SDR function, the revenue operations function. So they are all doing it themselves. They are founders who are doing everything, all of these complex workflows themselves. So just want to understand, where does Cargo fit at this stage and what should a founder get right before they can even think about fixing the infrastructure or just aligning it in their teams?
That's a good question. We used to think internally that our target are only big teams with very established RevOps or growth engineering team
Hmm.
practices. And that's still true. But in practice, we found that the spectrum of the topology of teams is very varied, right?
Yeah.
A better vector for getting to it is maybe what you're trying to achieve. And this can be an early stage or late stage, and you have
Right.
good and bad examples on both sides, right? And so the litmus test to know if Cargo is a good choice for you or not is, are you looking to do something that's reproducible? Are you
Hmm.
looking to do something at scale? And are you trying to do something that's observable over time?
Yeah.
And so if those three things are true and you're not able to satisfy those requirements with an existing tool, then you should think about Cargo. And for a lot of people, anecdotally, typically when they're thinking of one tool, let's say Clay or NA10, etc.,
Yeah.
and they need to stitch on another tool outside to do the job, then it's a good reflex to think about Cargo. So this is one anecdote that leads
Mm.
to that. So that's really
Interesting.
where we stand. So a lot of people in GTM graduate to Cargo when they
Yeah.
hit those roadblocks and they want to go to the next step.
Yeah, interesting. I think this is a very helpful way of actually thinking how Cargo fits in into the picture for any business, any startup working here. So I just want to focus on the last big question around, where is GTM headed? And do you see a future where the infrastructure layer is running most of the decisions and we humans are just setting most of the strategy? Or is there a version of this that goes wrong? Just this is the last one, last bit, but just wanted to have your understanding or opinion around where do you think GTM is headed right now?
That's a very good question and very difficult to answer. But I think it takes us sort of full circle back to how we started this conversation. Is
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good bet to think that GTM is heading to where engineering headed to. And in engineering, what really counts, and I think GTM is the same, is to look at your end user and work backwards from the experience that they need, right? And there's two kinds of end users in this case. So it's
Right.
your prospect and or the person speaking to that prospect. The more tools we are able to get to the GTM community and the better framework that we have to use those tools, I think we're enabling them to focus better on the experience of these people and work backwards from there to build the GTM stack that is required to give them that experience. And that overall means that, transactions in this world will just become better, nicer, more human.
Yeah.
And we need it because we're bombarded in our inboxes and our phones and notifications that we need better experiences and relationships, and that's really what works to have good transactions. So I think that's one. And then in doing that, everyone's experience improves. So the person building it, the person doing the engagement, the person receiving it, and so on, all of their experiences improve. And that means that they can do the best part of their jobs and leave the rest to, a well-made context data layer that handles that for them. How this could go wrong is how things go wrong in engineering, which is if you focus on the logic layer without fixing the data layer, then the logic layer is no good. And vice versa, you can accumulate a lot of very good data layer, a very good data layer, but the logic layer doesn't really leverage it to its full extent, and then you're leaving opportunities on the table. And so I think that's how it goes wrong. Thirdly, maybe if we don't really stick to the North Star of improving the experience for those end users, and if we fail to do that, then we'll just have a lot more scale and a lot more automation, but the experience probably
Will not
decreases
be
for
that good.
everyone. And that's not a great outcome for anyone involved, right? But I'm generally optimistic as to think how things are going. And I think it's also perfect timing for how society is reshaping, how we think about productivity and work and transactions.
Right.
Working in GTM right now is very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been working very close with the GTM engineers, so I can see how in tune we feel when we are actually talking to each other because PMM and then GTM engineering and the kind of tools that they're working with, it's really exciting to see all that data, all that signals that we once actually dreamed of, that it would help us position the product better. So I'm talking in product marketing terms, but when I speak to a GTM engineer who talks about cargo, how it's helping them get all those things automated with the workflows, feel it's becoming easier to actually do good marketing. It's becoming easier to actually be the right version of the product that you once really wanted to communicate to your users ultimately. So it's been a really fun ride so far.
Absolutely. And I think it's
Yeah.
a good time to learn as well. So people who enjoy learning have a lot.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Tariq, this was a really good conversation. And I really appreciate that you actually talked a lot about the workflows that you've built at Cargo, and One GTM Lab has definitely been, we have been partners ever since, and things have been moving so super good on that term. So thank you so much. And working with all those great workflows is something that has actually made the difference, made a huge difference. And so for anybody listening, who wants to go deeper, where do they find you? Where do they find Cargo? And who should specifically be reaching out right now?
Right. We're pretty easy to find. We're pretty vocal on LinkedIn, and we try to reply to everyone. We reply to all of our emails. We read them all. Paid to events. So come meet us there. Who should be coming to us are two people. So we've made a big push on the partnership channels. So, One GTM Lab being one of the first ones there. And so I'm, actively looking for good partners to
Yeah.
work with. And secondly, companies that are trying to build a better context layer and a better logic layer should try out Cargo. It's a free tool. You can set up a free account on the website and see what it really entails. And then, if that pleases you, then come talk to us and we can talk about how to scale what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll drop everything in the show notes. Cargo, Tariq's LinkedIn, and the post he wrote on GTM as infrastructure, which honestly is worth 5 minutes of your time if you're not in the market for tooling right now. But if this one landed for you, send this to whoever owns GTM or RevOps on your team. I'm definitely sure this episode is going to help you a lot get clarity. See you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Shruti. That was a pleasure.